I would like to help you decide which type of college or university would be the best experience for you and would help you the most in your career. So let's talk for a second about what makes me qualified to help you, and that is that I've taken both online and on-campus classes at various different colleges and universities, and I also now instruct in college and universities on both online and on-campus classes. So you're not going to find a lot of people who have more experience than me. You might find some who have as much, but I believe I am qualified to help you make those decisions. Now, I work in the IT field and have been for several decades, so for me, most of my experience comes from that perspective. However, I do believe that it is universal to help in making your decision. So let's first off talk about what makes the best type of candidate for an online or a brick-and-mortar type of school. So colleges are basically organizations that are accredited, as well as our 2-year or 4-year degree institutions. Universities usually start at a 4-year degree, which is a bachelor's, go on to a master's, and then a PhD. All right, so online schools, who's the best candidate? Well, I believe that for an online school, typically they're going to be bachelor's on up. They're not going to be a lot of associates types of degrees. Is going to be someone who's been working in the field in which they're trying to get a degree for 10 or more years. Now, the average online student is about 40 years old. So they probably have 10 or 20 years experience in their field. And typically what they want to do is get a piece of paper that says, yes, you are proficient in this area and you can move up in your organization or your company. And that's why a lot of people get them at around 40 years old. So, and I think it's a really good idea for someone who's been in their industry for a while to go to an online university because they don't need a lot of professors' help. They just need to plow through it as cheaply as possible just so they can check a box to say they have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or whatever it is. So this is a really good candidate because you only have around 45 to 49% success rate with people going to an all online school. Again, this is an online school that has no on-campus brick and mortar type of institution. So if you're a high school student, for instance, with no experience whatsoever, an online school that is just an online school may not be the best for you. You are probably not a good candidate for this type of school. Cost-wise, it's around $8,000 to $10,000 a year, which is comparable to a community college. So it's not super expensive, and a lot of times you'll have the ability to work at your own pace, so you may be able to graduate much more quickly than a 4-year institution. So you may get credit for life experiences, certifications such as in IT. There's a lot of certifications that'll get you credit, maybe even credit for various different high school type things towards things like math and other gen eds. So they'll give you a lot of credits that will take you a much further way just by the time you start on day one than typically a brick and mortar school may allow you to do. If you can get credit for your certifications such as an MCSE, a CCNA, all those types of things, and of course in other industries you'll have certifications there, then that is the type of school you want, especially you want to make sure that they are accredited. Also look for a nonprofit school as opposed to a for-profit school. Now, nonprofit schools are going to be a little bit more difficult to get into. They have a longer waiting time in most cases. They have a little bit more stringent rules as far as who is allowed in, and that's because they receive federal dollars typically, so they have to follow certain rules and regulations. A for-profit school typically doesn't need that, although some of them do receive federal funds. Mostly the government, the federal government is starting to move away, and state governments are starting to move away from funding these for-profit organizations because they tend to promise more than they can deliver. The cost is also a lot higher. You're going to see $20,000 to $30,000 a year in costs instead of around $8,000 to $10,000. So I definitely recommend you go if you're going to be a good candidate for an online college or university, such as what I just said, someone with a lot of experience. Then I would suggest you look and spend the extra time and effort to get into a nonprofit school instead of a for-profit one. And there's a lot of different examples of the for-profit and nonprofit. Here's an example for you. For a nonprofit, WGU is good. For-profit, University of Phoenix is good. They are both accredited. Just University of Phoenix is going to be a lot more expensive. They've also lost a lot of their students in the past 10 years, so they're not quite the same type of size that they once were, but they are still an accredited institution. Another good reason to go to an all-online school, especially if you're, in that 40-ish range, is if you have a family, have a mortgage. Of course, everybody is expected to be working if they're going to an online school, so they're going to allow you to have nighttime classes, pre-recorded classes, work at your own pace, as I mentioned earlier. So they're designed for working professionals, working adults. So that is a really good reason. So the cost, of course, especially for the nonprofit, is also going to save you money as well. Now let's talk about who's the best candidate for a brick and mortar type of school. Now, brick and mortar comes in two flavors. You've got your on-campus classes and you've got your online classes. So an online class at a brick and mortar school is going to be different than an all online school. And the reason is because at an all-online school, you're never going to be meeting your professors. You might be on the phone with one of them. You might be doing a remote session with one of them, but you're never actually going to be doing face-to-face one-on-one time where you can drive to their location and actually get a hold of them and have them show you something one-on-one. So a brick and mortar school is going to give you that advantage. And I recommend anybody who is a recent high school graduate who wants to go to a college or university is that they go to a brick and mortar type of school, because they're not going to have the life experience that the 40-year-old who's been working in their industry for the past 10 plus years has. They're going to need hands-on help from the professors. They're going to need, most of the time on-campus type of classes. So if that high school graduate has just had 4 years of math, and they want to go to a brick and mortar college, which I recommend, then I'm fine with them taking an online class because they've already had 4 years of math, and college math is really no harder than high school math. It's just regurgitated math. There's really no difference. It's one of the reasons why a lot of math classes in high school give you credit for college, because they know there's no difference. Math does not get any harder after high school. When you get into statistics or architecture, things like that, that math does get more difficult. But just basic algebra and calculus and trigonometry, that kind of stuff is the same in college as it is in high school. So good news for a lot of you recent high school graduates. You're not going to see a huge difference there. So online classes at brick and mortar college make sense if you've got that type of experience in those gen ed classes. But those specialty classes, such as IT classes, if you're an IT student, I would definitely recommend that you go to the on-campus classes, at least until you get a handle on whether you're really proficient in this. If you breeze through the first 2 or 3 on-campus classes, say in IT, and you just didn't need that much help, well, maybe you're a good candidate for an online class at a brick and mortar school. But at least you have the option to go to that professor at a future date in case you do get stuck. Whereas an on-campus class is great because you do have that immediate help from the professor, which can be a big help, especially if you don't have a lot of experience. So if you're being retrained, I definitely recommend a brick and mortar school. If you're a recent high school graduate, a brick and mortar school. Now let's talk about costs, for instance, and should you go to a prestigious or an Ivy League type of school? Well, I know a lot of high school students, they try to get super great grades so they can get into the best college possible, and that's all very admirable and certainly should be helpful for you to do that. However, they're not always giving away the types of scholarships that you may think. And also some scholarships are really hard to get. Like you have to write a really long paper or do a project or something like that. So should you go to an expensive college as opposed to a less expensive, maybe state college? Well, the reason why people go to these expensive and Ivy League colleges is one thing. It's not education. The education at Ivy League college, with the exception of places like MIT, but the education at an Ivy League college is no different than a state college. It's going to be the same classes. A lot of times it's going to be the same books, unless, of course, the professors have written their own. They force you to buy them at hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars. So really, there's no difference in the majority of these classes. Math is math, English is English, et cetera, et cetera. There's one reason why they go: networking. So it may cost you $100,000 a year to go to an Ivy League college. Even with scholarships, it still might cost you, $75,000 on up. However, that networking is worth everything. So if you come out of college with $400,000 or $500,000 in debt, but because of the networking in the Ivy League colleges that you've made, you're able to pull in a deep six-figure salary, you'll be able to pay that off in a few years. It's really not that big a deal as long as you manage your money wisely. Really, that's the only reason why you'd want to go to a higher-end college. If you're going for a government job or a job at a charitable organization or a military type of job, they don't care what college you went to, what university you went to. They only care about one thing, that you went to an accredited college or university, and they can check the box that says you went and you passed. They don't even look at the place that you went. So if you're going for that type of job, then don't even bother with a high-end college or university that costs a lot of money. There's no difference in the quality of education, and you're not going to get any further in life. The only reason you need to go to a $100,000 a year school is if you're going to go into private industry or you plan on working up to those CEO positions for making millions of dollars. Otherwise, it's just a box they check. They just don't care. So save your money, go get your state college or your community college, type of degree if you're the type of student that I had mentioned. So to recap, online schools are great for industry professionals who are already doing their type of job that they just need a piece of paper for. The brick and mortar schools, great for new students, retrained students. Online classes only for areas which you're proficient in the brick and mortar schools. Otherwise, take your on-campus classes. I hope that helps you, and I hope you get back to me and let me know how you're doing. Feel free to let me know any suggestions or let other students know suggestions by leaving a comment. Thanks very much.